Hello, my friends, and welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, Coach Lauren. Today, we're going to explore kinks and fetishes, understanding, accepting, and embracing sexual diversity. So, I'm so excited. Today's goal is going to create a safe, informative space to discuss diverse aspects of sexuality. So, today's episode, we're going to dive into the world of kinks and fetishes. I'm really aiming to help educate you and really reduce the stigma around these things. So, we're going to define kinks, fetishes, and emphasize the importance of understanding and also consent, as well as communication in these areas of sexual expression. You ready? Let's dive in. All right, so first off, what are kinks and fetishes? So, here's some definitions for you. So, a kink is a non normative sexual preference or behavior that adds excitement and variety to a person's life. So, a few examples of these could be role play, domination, submission dynamics, and bondage. I really want to highlight that I have an incredible episode on BDSM with a special guest interview in a past podcast. I hope you go back and take a listen to that. We get a nice deep dive into BDSM basics with Jen Luna. So I hope you enjoy that. Let's chat a little bit more about fetishes. Now, fetishes are sexual arousal linked to a specific object or a body part or an activity that really isn't considered sexual. Like, for example, leather, latex, and feet. So those are the two distinctions. Fetishes can sometimes be very central to a person's sexual satisfaction. So it's like considered essential to their arousal. While kinks are, usually like additional preferences. So you're thinking, okay, well, what are the prevalence of people like, with kinks and fetishes? Like, and if you are a kinkster, right? Like, how many fellow people are out there? Let's talk about it. So, according to a 2016 study by the Kinsey Institute, approximately 30 to 40% of people have some type of kink or fetish. So, this indicates that these preferences are more common than a lot of us may realize. There was also a 2017 National Library of Medicine study showing that 69% of men and 41% of women have at least one kind of non-traditional sexual interest. So if you're thinking, all right, well, why do people have kinks and fetishes? Like, where does this come from? Is it mental illness? Goodness gracious, there are so many psychological theories. Let's dive in. So, conditioning theory is the first one. So some experts, Dr. John Money, actually proposed that fetishes may develop through a process of sexual conditioning in early life. So, for example, positive sexual experience linked to a specific object. Then, have you heard of Sigmund Freud? Well, a Freudian, call it Freud, Sigmund Freud, Freudian view is an early theory. He suggested that fetishes may arise from unresolved conflicts in childhood. And this perspective is largely criticized and really not longer, accepted in modern psychology. Sigmund Freud was truly a theorist in a lot of early childhood. And at that time, some of them may work, but now they are pretty ruled out. How about some biological factors? You're like, all right, is this like neuro? All right, so neurobiology, there has been some studies that suggest that kinks and fetishes might have a neurological basis. So there was research from the archives of sexual behavior, found that certain types of sexual arousal may be linked to the way the brain processes sensory information and memories. Like, how cool is that? Then genetics. You're like, okay, well, if somebody in my family was really into BDSM, will I be, right? There's more research needed in this aspect, but, there may also be a genetic predisposition to developing certain sexual preferences. This does remain speculative, though, so keep that in mind. There's also, okay, cultural environmental factors. I'm talking societal norms. I'm talking media influences like literature, films, and of course, pornography. These all shape our desires, right? And then you have certain subcultures like BDSM communities where specific kinks can be normalized and most importantly, celebrated. So, for example, like the fetishization of feet classic example of fetish, right? And it could be something that stems from early life experiences where the feet were an object of like attention or admiration. And it may not be like inherently sexually at first, but over time it can develop, into a fetish. So let's talk about the common fetishes and kinks, all right? Let's start off with bondage and discipline. BDSM stands for bondage, dominance, submission, sadism, machismo. So it's one of the most well-known but misunderstood sexual preferences. There was a survey done by Dr. Justin Lee Miller in 2013. It showed that BDSM participants report higher levels of sexual satisfaction and lower levels of anxiety. So consent, communication, and trust are truly paramount in BDSM relationships and activities. Let's talk a bit about role play in fantasy. So what is role playing, right? You got like the nurse, the doctor, the waitress, the rich man out to dinner, the businessman. So here's the deal. Role playing is going to involve this acting out of various scenarios, right? You get the sexual excitement from it. So role play helps people explore desires without real world consequences. You get to kind of like put the shoes on of that person, but you don't actually have to wear those shoes for the rest of your life. So then let's talk about fetishes for specific objects. Leather, latex, uniforms, right? So I really want to discuss the fetishization of materials like leather or latex. They can develop due to the tactile experience of them, right? Like the way they look or the way they feel on the body. And this also can be linked to particular subcultures like leather clubs. There is that widespread foot fetish, right? This is one of the most common ones. Research indicates that foot-related content is often one of the most searched for terms in online adult content. So, fun little fact there, right? Yeah, people are definitely selling their feet online, which is great. I have a size 7. My feet are adorable, but I just feel like I need an agent to get that done. So if anybody wants to be my foot agent, let me know. So some other popular fetishes are lingerie. We can also have other body parts, right? Like shoulders, hands, hair as well, right? Fingernails, glasses, right? People can have a little like predisposition to that. Certain piercings, tattoos, um, breasts, legs, a little bit of everything. So here's the deal. Like, let's talk a little bit about the science of fetishes a bit more. Neurological and cognitive aspects. So the brain may associate specific objects or actions with pleasure over time. So if we experience it at one point, our brain is wired to experience that pleasure again, and we expect to do so, right? So 2016 study in the Journal of Sex Research suggested that neural conditioning and associative learning can play a key role in the development of fetishes. So when we associate with those things and associate with pleasure over time, it really does develop into a possible fetish. So sexual arousal and Pavlovian conditioning. I don't know if anybody's familiar with Pavlov and experiments with dogs, right? This is classical conditioning. So this could explain why some people develop fetishes. So for example, like if a person repeatedly experiences sexual pleasure in the presence of an object, say, okay, for example, high heels, right? Their brain begins to associate that object with sexual excitement. So these are kind of how that conditions in is this is something that works for me to get me excited. It's worked in the past, so it's definitely my thing, right? Then we have the fetishism hypothesis. This is researcher like Dr. Thomas Cash explored how fetishes can actually represent an extension of a person's need for control or perfection in sexual scenarios. So, for instance, a fetish for a particular object may symbolize an actual deeper psychological need for power, fulfillment, structure of the fantasies. So, we get it. Like, it's societally, this can be stigmatized. There's a lot, especially when it's conservative or traditional cultures. A lot of individuals can feel ashamed in their desires, and their fetishes and their, the kinks, and on how to even talk about that. And this is really, it's can lead to a lot of anxiety and guilt, and also issues in the relationship where people feel unfulfilled but unable to have the confidence to speak about it because they're worried about being judged. They're worried about being shamed, and that's something that I do work with my clients on individually. Absolutely. I really just want to normalize this. All right. Kinks and fetishes are part of human sexual diversity. They do not signal a problem. Okay. So, according to the DSM-5, this is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. There's only extreme cases of fetishism in there, and those are the ones that are considered pathological where they cause distress or impairment. So, if your fetish makes it where you are unable to leave the house, you are unable to refrain yourself out in public, there's things like that. That's a very, very, different thing here. So conversations where you approach, this with openness, respect, understanding what consent is going to look like in each different sexual context with each new fetish or desire, right? Really discussing your boundaries openly and honestly. For example, I'd like to share something that excites me sexually. Would you be open to exploring that with me? So I really want to talk more about things that make you feel safe, right? So setting up the space for it to be a safe feeling to open up about this, to have a conversation. It's really dinner table type of talk. It's not something I would suggest to do where everybody's already naked. And we're already sexually charged and vulnerable as all heck, right? So I really want to touch on the importance of safe, sane, and consensual, which is SSC. This is practices in all kink-related activities. This is very important to be aware of for the need for informed consent, clear communication, and mutual respect among anybody that you're exploring your kinks with. So I would love it if you have any questions to please email me. All my contact info is right in the description. I hope that this really kind of encouraged some healthy consensual exploration and some thinking. I want to just reinforce that these types of preferences are part of our sexual diversity, and it really is a healthy part of a fulfilling sex life. So truly just want to recap the importance of self-acceptance and communication when it comes to exploring and talking about your kinks and fetishes. Um, I encourage you, here's your call to action, friends. I encourage you to explore your desires, right? Openly, without judgment. I want you to ask your partner about their sexual preferences, if there's any kinks you guys haven't talked about yet, or fantasies you may have. Absolutely seek out some resources on safe sexual practices in any of these different types of communities. There is some great resources I want to mention. Books on sexual empowerment and kink. Example, the new Topping book by Dossie Easton and Janet W. Hardy. Or you can visit the website kinkacademy.com. So, my friends, I really hope this gave you a little dive into the world of kink and fetishes. While research is still up and going, right? I really just wanted to normalize any sexual preferences and just create a safe space for you to learn about it and know that you're encouraged to share if you have them, even if that's not with anybody you want to be active with yet, but maybe possibly a sex coach. I got you. Stay kinky, my friends. This is a very non-judgmental space for your exploring your desires, and I'm going to leave you with this. What do you desire? Is there more that you have not explored yet that you hope to?